see how all this relates to an actual essay assignment. We'll review the instructions, the stimulus, the question stem, and how to apply the Kaplan method for analytical writing to that assignment. First, let's look at the general instructions. Take a moment to read through them. These instructions mimic the Kaplan method well. You're even told to spend time planning and organizing your essay before you type, and to save time at the end for proofreading. These instructions never change. On test day, you won't have to spend any time reading the instruction screen because you'll already know what you're supposed to do. Look at the following 4 points regarding the essay assessment section. These are key. The test maker's purpose here for you is threefold. Show you understand the key parts of the author's argument, perform an analysis in an organized fashion using reasons that are at least relevant, if not compelling, and obey the rules of standard written English. But you already know all of this. As a Kaplan-trained test taker, you have nothing new to learn from the AWA instructions. After the instructions, your second screen will show the assignment. The first and last paragraphs of the assignment will be the same when you take your test, only the argument itself will be different. The argument will be structured in a very familiar way. It resembles a critical reasoning stimulus. It will have a conclusion and evidence, and you'll be able to analyze it to find assumptions and flaws. Every argument assignment will be flawed, with multiple assumptions needed to get from the evidence to the conclusion. In fact, there will be more assumptions than you will need to craft a great essay. The key language occurs in the second half of the instructions. Notice the language that follows. You must do this to receive at least a 4. Otherwise, you're not going to perform adequately in the eyes of the grader. You must be sure to analyze the argument. That is, identify the conclusion and paraphrase the evidence. As you see here, you may also discuss additional evidence to strengthen or weaken the argument. That's why you need to use the Kaplan method and Kaplan's essay template to make sure you accomplish the objectives. Now let's take a look at an example of an AWA topic and see how the Kaplan method works. Step 1 is to take apart the argument. Expect to spend about 2 minutes on this step. You must understand the argument well before you can prepare and write a high-scoring essay. Your first task is to identify the conclusion. Here, the first sentence is the conclusion. Note the opinionated tone. Next, identify the evidence. The rest of the argument here is the evidence. To complete the first step of the Kaplan method, paraphrase the argument in your own words into one sentence to make sure you understand it. Here's a good summary of the argument. Proposed changes in state requirements for certification of new teachers will alleviate current problems with poor training of teachers. In step 2, you'll select the key points from the argument, some of which you'll include in your essay. First, identify at least some of the flaws and assumptions in the author's reasoning. Always accept the evidence as true, but that doesn't mean it's always sufficient to support the argument. You should already be questioning the conclusion you read a moment ago. Perhaps some of the following questions popped into your head. Do we even know if there's a serious problem with poorly trained teachers? Is it lack of training that makes teachers perform poorly? What does the author mean by the future? After all, if only new teachers are required to have this training, how long are we to wait for all the current poorly trained teachers to leave the system? Do we know if current teachers haven't taken the particular courses that will now be required for new teachers? Is there any evidence that these particular courses will make any difference in actual classroom performance? You get the idea. Luckily for you, after you brainstorm through the flaws and assumptions in the argument, you'll have plenty to choose from to get those 2 or 3 key points to discuss in your essay. Once you choose the strongest 2 or 3 assumptions, think about what evidence would undermine the assumptions. These are weakeners. You can write a paragraph for each assumption with its accompanying weakener. 1 or 2 such paragraphs will suffice. Then, think about what additional evidence might make these assumptions more supportable. Such evidence would be a strengthener. Try to include at least 1 strengthener in your second to last paragraph. The highest scoring essays include a strengthener paragraph. Take about 5 minutes for step 2, writing notes for your ideas. Don't count on remembering these ideas. Having them in writing on your noteboard will make typing a high-scoring essay in only 20 minutes much easier. Your strong analysis of the arguments in steps 1 and 2 allows you to complete step 3 in about a minute. Your first paragraph will identify and paraphrase the conclusion and the evidence. Be sure to state that the author's argument is inadequate to support the conclusion. Present your analysis of the argument in the next paragraph. Start with your strongest point. Then include a few weakener paragraphs, plus a strengthener paragraph. Your final paragraph will be short, just 2 or 3 sentences. Remind the reader that the original argument remains inadequate despite the additional evidence you recommended in your essay. Step 4 is the longest part of the process. 20 minutes of typing simple, clear writing. Employ keywords to guide the reader through the logic of your analysis. Make sure you finish with enough time for a couple minutes of proofreading. Here's an essay written on this assignment that would score a 6. It's by no means perfect, but it answers the question and contains many keywords that direct the grader through her reading. When you get a chance, read it over. And don't get thrown off by the length of the essay. Number of words is not a grading criteria for your GMAT AWA task. And finally, step 5 leaves 2 minutes for proofreading. The fewer fixable problems a grader sees, the better the likelihood that your essay will get a good, strong score. Practicing essay writing while using a timer is the best way to prepare for the AWA. Your Premier book includes many sample essay prompts, and you can get the actual prompts the testmaker uses on the GMAC's website, www.mba.com. The more practice you have in planning, analyzing, and organizing using realistic time limits, the better and smoother your final essay.